Did you know that one of the most famous actresses in Hollywood history almost disappeared from this film completely, and barely anyone noticed her during filming? That actress was Marilyn Monroe, and this movie was one of her very first big chances on screen. But the story of the Asphalt Jungle goes so much deeper than that one surprising name. Let's dive in and discover 20 weird and amazing facts about the Asphalt Jungle. Number 20. A director who changed crime movies forever. John Huston was not a simple man. He was a storyteller, a painter, a boxer, and a hunter, all rolled into one wild human being. When he sat down to direct the Asphalt Jungle in 1950, he already had some impressive films behind him. He had made The Maltese Falcon and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. People already respected him. But with the Asphalt Jungle, John Huston wanted to do something different. He wanted to make a crime film that did not feel like a simple cartoon of good versus evil. He wanted to show criminals as real people, people with hopes, with tired eyes, with families waiting at home, and with dreams that were just a little bit broken. That was a bold idea for 1950. Most crime films at the time showed criminals as ugly monsters who deserved everything bad that happened to them. Huston looked at those films and shook his head. He believed that if you really looked closely at a criminal, you would find a human being, someone who made wrong choices, yes, but someone you could still understand. He took that idea and built the entire movie around it. Every character in the Asphalt Jungle has a soft spot. Every character has something they love. The old safecracker loves his homeland far away. The getaway driver loves horses. Even the boss of the heist has quiet, gentle moments. Huston created a world where crime was not glamorous. It was heavy. It was exhausting. It was real. The film felt like you were watching people try to survive in a jungle made of streets and shadows. That is actually where the title came from. The city itself was the jungle, cold, competitive, and merciless. Huston understood that deeply, and he poured that understanding into every single scene. What looked like a crime thriller was actually a deeply human story in disguise. Number 19. The novel that started. Everything before the camera rolled even once, there was a book. The Asphalt Jungle began as a novel written by a man named W.R. Burnett. Burnett published it in 1949, just 1 year before the film came out. That was incredibly fast. Usually it takes years for a book to become a movie. But the story moved so quickly because the people at MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, one of the biggest movie studios in Hollywood, recognized something special the moment they read it. Burnett was already a respected crime writer. He had written Little Caesar back in 1929, which had helped launch the gangster film genre. So when his new novel arrived, people paid attention. The book told the story of a carefully planned jewel robbery in a big American city. It followed the criminals with patience and honesty. It showed their planning, their fears, their relationships, and finally, their downfall. What made the book unusual was that Burnett clearly liked his characters. He respected them even while writing about their crimes. That feeling of unexpected sympathy was something audiences had rarely felt before. Huston read the book and immediately wanted to bring it to life on screen. He worked with Ben Maddow to write the screenplay, and together they stayed very close to the spirit of Burnett's original story. They did not turn the criminals into heroes, but they did not make them monsters either. They kept that delicate middle ground, that honest, uncomfortable truth about human weakness and human longing. The result was a screenplay that felt rich and layered, like good soil that had been worked carefully for a long time. A great movie always starts somewhere. This one started with a quiet man and a very honest book. Number 18. Filming in real streets. Not a studio set Hollywood in 1950 loved its studio sets. A studio set was a fake world built inside a giant warehouse. You could control the light. You could control the sound. You could build exactly what you needed and paint the rest. It was safe, predictable, and comfortable. John Huston was not very interested in comfortable. For the Asphalt Jungle, he made a decision that surprised many people at MGM. He wanted to film in real locations, actual streets, actual buildings, actual spaces that breathed with real life. Some of the filming took place in Cincinnati, Ohio. That was unusual. That was brave. Real streets are messy. Real streets have noise from passing cars, curious strangers walking into your shot, changing light that refuses to cooperate, and 100 small problems that a studio set would never give you. But Huston believed that the mess was worth it. He believed that when audiences saw a real street, they felt something different in their bones. A painted backdrop looks like a painted backdrop, no matter how talented the artist. But a real wet sidewalk under gray morning light, that looks like truth. The film's visual style was built on that truth. Cinematographer Harold Rosson worked with Huston to capture the city in deep, dark shadows. The streets looked like they were hiding things. The buildings looked tired and cold. Every frame felt like a place where something secret was about to happen. That feeling did not come from clever tricks. It came from real places that already carried their own weight and history. What looked like perfect cinema geography was actually just honest observation of real life. Number 17. The Man Behind the Heist. Sterling Hayden's quiet power. Sterling Hayden played Dix Handley, the tough and quiet muscle of the robbery crew. If you watch him in the film, you might think he was born to play exactly that kind of man. He was tall, he was broad, his face looked like it had been cut from stone. He moved slowly and spoke carefully, like a man who measured every word before spending it. But what most people do not know is that Sterling Hayden was going through an extremely painful time in his personal life when he made this film. He had recently cooperated with the House Un-American Activities Committee, a government group that was hunting for communists in Hollywood during that tense political period. Hayden named names. He told the committee about other people in the film industry who had connections to left-wing politics. He later called that decision the biggest regret of his entire life. He wrote about it with enormous guilt in his memoirs. He said he felt like a coward. He felt like he had betrayed people to save himself. So when Hayden walked onto the set of the Asphalt Jungle and played a man who was loyal to his crew, who would rather die than run away, who dreamed quietly of going back to a farm in Kentucky, there was something deeply personal in that performance. There was real guilt underneath the surface. There was real longing for a simpler life where he had not made the wrong choice. Hayden brought all of that with him. Every quiet moment he had on screen carried weight. You believed him completely. That was not just acting. That was a man carrying something very heavy and not quite knowing where to put it down. Number 16. Sam Jaffe's unforgettable performance. Sam Jaffe played Doc Riedenschneider, the brilliant but gentle criminal mastermind who plans the entire heist. He is the heart of the film. He is small, old, soft-spoken, and terrifyingly intelligent. When he explains his plan, you want to lean closer to the screen. When he smiles, something warm moves through the room. Sam Jaffe was already a respected stage actor when he took this role. He had worked in theater for many years and had a deep understanding of how to make quiet moments speak loudly. John Huston wanted someone who could play intelligence without showing off. He wanted someone who made you believe this small, polite man had planned everything in perfect detail. Jaffe delivered exactly that. His Doc is not threatening in any obvious way. He does not shout. He does not wave a weapon. He simply thinks. And thinking is his superpower. But here is the painful part of the story. After The Asphalt Jungle was released and Sam Jaffe received enormous praise, he was even nominated for a BAFTA award, which is the British version of the Oscar. He was blacklisted. Because of the same political witch hunt that had pressured Sterling Hayden, Jaffe was put on a list of people that Hollywood studios refused to hire. His career slowed dramatically. Years passed before he could work freely again. A man who gave one of the finest performances of 1950 was then punished for his political beliefs. The contrast between his artistic triumph and his personal suffering was heartbreaking. The screen loved him. The industry did not. Number 15. Louis Calhern and the Role That Broke His Heart. Louis Calhern played Alonzo Emmerich, the corrupt lawyer who secretly funds the jewel robbery and then tries to steal everything for himself. Calhern was a big, handsome, silver-haired man with a voice that could fill a theater without effort. He played Emmerich with a kind of sad elegance. Emmerich is not purely evil. He is desperate. He owes money. He has a young girlfriend, Angela, played by Marilyn Monroe, who expects expensive things. He has a sick wife at home who loves him. He is trapped between the life he has built and the life he actually wants, and the gap between those two things is destroying him. Calhern understood that character deeply. He played Emmerich not as a villain, but as a man who made one enormous mistake and kept making smaller mistakes, trying to cover it up. What is fascinating is that Calhern came from classical theater. He had played grand historical roles on Broadway. Taking a part in a crime film might have seemed like a step down to some people. But Calhern saw the depth in Emmerich. He saw the tragedy. He brought a theatrical weight to the role that lifted the entire film. His final scene, where everything collapses around Emmerich and he is left alone with his failure, is deeply moving. There is no dramatic speech. There is just a man sitting very still while his world ends quietly around him. That stillness was more powerful than any shouting. It looked like dignity. It felt like sorrow. Number 14. Marilyn Monroe's almost invisible beginning. Here she is, the name everyone is curious about. Marilyn Monroe had a small role in the Asphalt Jungle. She played Angela Finlay, the young girlfriend of the corrupt lawyer Emmerich. Her role was not large. She appeared in only a few scenes. Her total time on screen was brief, and yet something happened the moment she appeared. Audiences leaned forward. Something in the room changed. Monroe had a presence that was almost impossible to explain. She was not yet the giant star she would become. She was still figuring herself out, still working on her craft, still learning how to control that extraordinary natural magnetism. Director John Huston initially had doubts about casting her. He tested many actresses for even this small part. But when Monroe walked in for her screen test and performed the scene, something was undeniably there. He gave her the role. Monroe herself later said that this film was a turning point for her. She understood after seeing herself on screen that she had something real to offer. She was not just a pretty face. She could act. She could hold still and let the camera find something true inside her. The scene where she reclines on a couch and speaks softly to Emmerich is still studied in film schools today. She was barely in the movie, and somehow she is one of the things people remember most. That was not luck. That was talent announcing itself very quietly before the world was ready to hear it. The jungle had found its most unexpected flower. Number 13. The heist scene. Planned like a real crime. The central jewel robbery in the Asphalt Jungle was filmed with extraordinary care and detail. John Huston did not want it to look like a Hollywood movie heist. He wanted it to look like a real job, messy, tense, procedural, and nerve-wracking. To achieve that, he and his team actually studied how real robberies worked. They consulted with people who understood criminal procedure. They mapped out every step of the heist the way a real criminal crew would actually plan it. They thought about the timing. They thought about the tools. They thought about what could go wrong and exactly how it would go wrong when it did. The filming of that sequence was slow and deliberate. Huston shot it from angles that felt documentary, like a fly on the wall watching something real happen. There was no swelling romantic music during the heist. There was mostly silence, broken by small sounds, a scraping tool, a careful footstep, a held breath. That silence was terrifying. Most heist films of that era would have used exciting music to make the audience's heart pound. Huston trusted the silence to do the same job more honestly. He was right. Audiences who watched the heist scene leaned forward in their seats without even realizing they were doing it. They felt the tension physically. The film had pulled them inside the room with the criminals, and now they were holding their breath too. It looked effortless on screen. Behind the camera, it was the result of weeks of careful planning and precise execution. The heist in the movie was planned like a real crime, and filmed the same way. Number 12. The costume design that told hidden stories. In the Asphalt Jungle, nobody wears bright colors. Look at the film closely, and you will notice that almost everyone dresses in gray, black, dark brown, and charcoal. That was not an accident. Costume designer Helen Rose worked carefully with the production team to make sure that the visual language of the clothes matched the emotional language of the story. Every character's clothes told you something about who they were without them having to say a word. Doc Riedenschneider, the elegant mastermind, dressed neatly in a well-tailored suit that was slightly out of date. His clothes suggested someone who once had a good life and remembered what good things felt like. Dix Handley dressed roughly and practically, clothes for a man who worked with his body and had no patience for elegance. Emmerich, the corrupt lawyer, wore the most expensive clothes in the film, but even his fine suit looked slightly tired, slightly stretched, the clothes of a man pretending to be more comfortable than he actually was. And Marilyn Monroe's Angela wore something softer, lighter, almost out of place in the dark world around her, like a small piece of warmth that had wandered into the wrong room. None of this was accidental. Every stitch was a decision. Every color was a choice. The costumes created an invisible layer of storytelling beneath the dialogue and the action. Most audiences never consciously noticed it, but they felt it. They felt the weight and the mood without knowing why. That is the invisible magic of great costume design. Number 11. John Huston's complicated relationship with MGM. Making the Asphalt Jungle was not a smooth journey. John Huston and the executives at MGM, the studio producing the film, did not always agree. MGM was one of the most powerful studios in Hollywood, famous for glamorous musicals, glittering stars, and films that made audiences feel wonderful. The Asphalt Jungle was none of those things. It was dark, it was morally complicated. It refused to punish its criminals dramatically or celebrate its law enforcement figures triumphantly. Some executives at MGM were nervous. They worried that audiences would not want to watch a film that made them sympathize with thieves. They worried about the censors, the Hays Code, the official set of rules that governed what could and could not be shown in American movies, was still very much in force in 1950. Huston had to fight carefully to keep his vision intact. He knew how to talk to studio executives. He knew how to be charming and persuasive while quietly protecting the parts of the film that mattered most to him. He made small compromises in places where the compromises did not hurt the story. He held firm on the things that would have broken it. The result was a film that satisfied the censors technically while still telling the honest, morally gray story Huston had always intended. But that battle was exhausting. Every great film carries the invisible scars of the battles its director fought to protect it. The Asphalt Jungle was no different. What looked like a finished, confident film was actually the survivor of a long negotiation. Number 10. The film's revolutionary approach to sympathy. Before the Asphalt Jungle, Hollywood crime films generally followed a simple moral rule. Good people were good, bad people were bad. The audience knew exactly who to root for and who to fear. Criminals were ugly, violent, and stupid. They deserved their punishment. Good citizens were clean, smart, and morally upright. They always won in the end. The Asphalt Jungle threw that rule out the window. Huston and screenwriter Ben Maddow wrote criminals who were intelligent, gentle in their private moments, capable of genuine loyalty and love, and ultimately more human than the supposedly respectable people around them. Think about that carefully. The corrupt lawyer Emmerich is a pillar of the community on the surface. He is educated, well-dressed, and socially respected. He is also a liar, a thief, and a coward. Meanwhile, the criminal Dix Handley, the hired muscle, the man who breaks things and frightens people, dreams of going home to the farm where he grew up, the land his family lost, the horses he loves. He has a tenderness in him that Emmerich will never have. Huston was asking his audience a question. Who is really the criminal here? Is it the man who steals openly, or the man who steals while wearing a nice suit and calling himself respectable? That question was radical in 1950. Some critics were uncomfortable with it. Some audiences were uncomfortable with it. But many people recognized it as the truth. The film held a mirror up to society, and the reflection was not entirely flattering. And that was exactly what great art was supposed to do. Number 9. Harold Rosson and the Language of Shadow. The visual beauty of the Asphalt Jungle is inseparable from the work of its cinematographer, Harold Rosson. Rosson was a veteran of Hollywood who had worked on films going back to the silent era. He understood light the way a musician understands sound, as something to be shaped, controlled, and used emotionally. For the Asphalt Jungle, Rosson embraced shadows, deep, dark, enveloping shadows that pressed in from the edges of every frame. He used a visual style called film noir, a French term meaning black film that had been developing in Hollywood throughout the 1940s. Film noir used darkness as a storytelling tool. Characters stood in pools of light surrounded by darkness, which made them look isolated, trapped, exposed. The world around them felt dangerous and unknowable. Rosson took those techniques and applied them with extraordinary precision to every scene in the film. Watch how the light falls on Doc Riedenschneider when he is planning his heist. His face is illuminated, his hands are in shadow. It suggests a mind working in the light, while the actions it plans remain in darkness. Watch how the outdoor scenes are filmed. Even daylight looks cold and gray, as if the sun itself has decided not to help these people. Every visual choice Rosson made reinforced the film's emotional world. The photography told you how to feel before anyone spoke a single word. That was the art of it. Darkness was not just an absence of light. It was a language, and Rosson spoke it fluently. Number 8. The Real City. Underneath the movie city. When John Huston decided to film some of the Asphalt Jungle in Cincinnati, Ohio, he was making a statement. Cincinnati in 1950 was a real working American city. It had real streets with real grit. It had neighborhoods that looked exactly like the neighborhoods in the film, not too glamorous, not too dramatic, just honest and a little tired. The city's architecture had a heaviness to it, a mid-century solidity that made every building look like it had been standing for a long time and expected to stand for a long time more. These locations gave the film a documentary feeling that no studio set could have provided. When characters walk down a street in the Asphalt Jungle, you can feel the actual weight of that pavement. You can almost feel the cold of an Ohio winter night. You can almost smell the particular smell of an American city in that era. Coal smoke and automobile exhaust and something that was not quite clean. That sensory authenticity went into the film like an ingredient into cooking. You might not be able to name it if someone asked you, but you could taste it. Audiences who had never been to Cincinnati watched the film and believed completely in the world it showed them. They felt they were inside a real city, watching real things happen to real people. That belief was the foundation of everything else. If you do not believe in the world a film shows you, nothing else in that film can work. Huston understood that. He went to real places to find real belief. Number 7. The film's influence on every heist movie that followed here is something that might genuinely surprise you. Almost every heist film you have ever watched owes something to the Asphalt Jungle. Ocean's 11, Heat, Riffraff, The Italian Job, Inside Man, The Town. Every one of these films, and dozens more, carries the DNA of what John Huston created in 1950. The Asphalt Jungle invented the modern heist film template. It showed that a robbery story could be structured around the planning, the execution, and then the aftermath, the disintegration. It showed that each member of a criminal crew should have a specific skill, a specific personality, and a specific human vulnerability. It showed that the heist itself should feel procedural and real, not magical. It showed that the ending should be honest, that the best-laid plans fall apart because human beings are imperfect. All of these ideas, which now feel so familiar and natural in a heist film, were essentially invented or perfected by the Asphalt Jungle. Later, filmmakers studied this film the way students study a textbook. Jean-Pierre Melville, the great French crime director, said it was one of his most important influences. Michael Mann, who directed Heat, one of the greatest crime films of the 1990s, cited it directly. Quentin Tarantino has spoken about it with reverence. When a film becomes the invisible foundation beneath so many other films, it has achieved something rare and lasting. Most audiences today have never seen the Asphalt Jungle, but they have seen its children and grandchildren without knowing it. Number 6. The score. That chose. Silence over music. Music in a film is a powerful emotional tool. A good film score tells audiences how to feel. It warns them when danger is coming. It breaks their hearts when sadness arrives. It fills them with excitement when the action begins. Most films of 1950 used their music loudly and generously. Miklos Rozsa composed the music for the Asphalt Jungle, and he was one of the finest film composers in Hollywood. He had won Academy Awards for his work. He was enormously talented, but John Huston made a decision that surprised people. He used Rossa's music very sparingly. In many scenes, including the most tense and critical scenes, there was no music at all, just silence or just the natural sounds of the world. A ticking mechanism, a street sound from outside, a character's breathing. Huston believed that music could become a kind of emotional instruction to the audience. It could tell them what to feel instead of letting them discover it themselves. He wanted audiences to feel their own feelings, not be guided into borrowed ones by an orchestral score. That trust in the audience was unusual and brave. The moments of silence in the Asphalt Jungle are some of its most powerful moments. When you hear nothing, you listen harder. You pay more attention. Your own imagination fills the silence with whatever frightens you most. Rossa's music, when it did appear, landed harder because it had been withheld. Restraint made it more powerful, not less. What was not there mattered as much as what was. Chernobyl. Number 5. The ending that refused to lie. Hollywood films of the 1940s and 50s were expected to follow a particular rule when it came to criminals. They had to be punished. The law had to win. Evil had to be defeated. This was part of the Hays Code, those censorship rules that governed Hollywood at the time. The criminals in the Asphalt Jungle do, technically, fail. Their heist goes wrong. They scatter and run. One by one, they meet their separate ends. So the film followed the rule, but the way Huston filmed those endings is what makes the film extraordinary and unusual. The death of Dix Handley, played by Sterling Hayden, is filmed not as a punishment, but as something closer to a fulfillment. He drives through the night toward his dream, the farm in Kentucky where he was a boy, where horses ran in green fields. He is dying from a wound, but he keeps driving. He reaches the farm. He walks into the field. He touches the ground that meant everything to him. And then he falls. Horses walk slowly toward him. It is not triumphant. It is not dramatic. It is heartbreaking and achingly beautiful. Huston filmed a criminal's death as a kind of grace, as a homecoming, as a small, private, real dream that almost came true. The censors got their rule followed. Huston got his truth told. It looked like a punishment from the outside, but it felt like something else entirely. That was artistry working at the highest possible level. Number 4. The critical reception that changed film history. When The Asphalt Jungle was released in May of 1950, the critical response was extraordinary. Reviewers understood immediately that something different had arrived. Many critics praised it as the finest crime film ever made, a bold claim in any era, but particularly bold for a film so recently completed. The film was nominated for 4 Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Director for John Huston. It was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Sam Jaffe. It was nominated for Best Screenplay for John Huston and Ben Maddow. And it was nominated for Best Cinematography for Harold Rosson. It did not win any of those Oscars, which is still considered one of the greater injustices in Oscar history by film scholars. But the nominations alone announced the film's importance. Audiences responded powerfully as well. The film made money. It was not just an art house experiment that critics loved and ordinary people ignored. Real audiences went to see it and talked about it afterward with the slightly unsettled feeling that great films always leave behind. That feeling of having been shown something true that you maybe did not entirely want to see. The film went into the world and stayed there. It did not fade away. It did not become a curiosity. It became a classic, one of those films that keeps teaching new filmmakers how to see, how to listen, and how to trust their audience with difficult human truths. Number 3. John Huston's personal philosophy, embedded in every frame. John Huston lived an enormous life. He was a painter, a hunter, a soldier, a storyteller, a traveler. He had seen real danger and real beauty in equal measure. He had lived in Ireland, in Africa, in Mexico. He had worked in war as a documentary filmmaker, capturing real combat for the United States Army during the Second World War. All of that living went into his films. When Huston made The Asphalt Jungle, he was not just making a crime movie. He was saying something about the human condition. He believed deeply that human beings were neither simply good nor simply evil. He believed that everyone was complicated. Everyone was driven by needs and fears that they themselves did not fully understand. He believed that society's labels, criminal, respectable, law-abiding, dangerous, were much too simple for the complex reality of human beings. He embedded all of that philosophy into The Asphalt Jungle. The film does not judge, it observes. It watches its characters with a patience and a compassion that feels genuinely respectful, even when those characters are doing something wrong. That quality, the refusal to judge while still being honest, is rare in any kind of storytelling. It requires the storyteller to hold two opposite feelings at the same time: moral clarity and human sympathy. Huston could do that. He had lived enough to know that most people who made terrible choices were not terrible people. They were just people in terrible circumstances, doing their imperfect best. He put that understanding on screen and called it cinema. Number 2, the legacy that only grew stronger with time. 50 years after The Asphalt Jungle was released, critics and filmmakers were still talking about it. 70 years after its release, it was placed on the United States National Film Registry, a list of films selected for preservation because they are considered culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. That is not a small honor. That is the official recognition that a film belongs to the permanent heritage of American culture. In the decades between 1950 and today, The Asphalt Jungle has never stopped influencing the art of cinema. Film students study it. Directors quote it. Actors use scenes from it in acting classes to teach the difference between performing an emotion and actually feeling it on screen. Marilyn Monroe's small but unforgettable appearance is analyzed in universities around the world as an example of natural screen presence in its earliest and most honest form. Sterling Hayden's quiet, layered performance is held up as a model of what masculine restraint can achieve when it is filled with genuine personal feeling. John Huston's direction is cited as a masterclass in trusting your audience, refusing to explain things they can feel for themselves, and finding the human truth inside every genre story. The Asphalt Jungle began as a crime film. It is now a piece of history. It is proof that when artists commit fully to truth, when they refuse to take the easy path, the comfortable path, the safe and predictable path, something lasting emerges. Something that does not belong only to its own time, but to every time. The jungle was made of asphalt, but the film built on top of it was made of something much more durable. Shot number 1. The moment Marilyn Monroe understood who she was. We arrive at the greatest and most personal story of all. Marilyn Monroe came to the set of the Asphalt Jungle in 1949 for filming. The movie was released in '50, but production happened the year before. She was 23 years old. She was still Norma Jean in many ways, the girl from a difficult childhood, the young woman who had been pushed from place to place, who had been told she was pretty, but perhaps not talented, who had been in Hollywood long enough to understand how quickly pretty could disappear. She had small roles before this one, but nothing that had truly announced her. John Huston tested her for the role of Angela. She came in, nervous but determined. She did the scene. And something happened. Huston saw it. The camera saw it. Even Monroe herself felt it happen. She later told people that something clicked into place inside her during that screen test. She understood something about herself that she hadn't fully understood before. She understood that when the camera looked at her, it saw something true. Not just a face, not just a body, a feeling, a quality of being present and real and soft and entirely herself. That understanding, that specific moment of self-recognition, gave Monroe the confidence to fight for her career in ways she had not fought before. She began to take herself seriously as an actress. She began to study. She began to develop the craft that would eventually make her one of the most celebrated performers in film history. The Asphalt Jungle gave the world a great crime film, and it also gave Marilyn Monroe the gift of knowing who she was. That was perhaps its most quietly revolutionary act of all. Bonus fact: the secret test that nobody remembers here is something that almost no one talks about when they discuss the Asphalt Jungle. Before John Huston committed to his final approach, the dark, shadow-filled, morally complex film that audiences eventually saw, he conducted an unusual experiment. He screened early footage and rough cuts for small groups of ordinary people, not film industry professionals, not critics, not executives, but regular men and women who went to the movies for pleasure and had no particular reason to be polite about what they saw. He wanted to know something specific. He wanted to know whether those ordinary people would feel sympathetic toward the criminals on screen, not because they approved of crime, but because they recognized something human. The results of those early screenings were not entirely encouraging. Some people in those early audiences were troubled by their own sympathy. They felt unsettled because they found themselves caring about the robbers. They expected to feel safely superior to the criminals on screen, and instead they found themselves understanding them. That unsettled feeling was reported back to Huston. Some people at the studio thought it meant the film was failing. Huston thought it meant the film was working. He believed that the job of a great story was not to make the audience comfortable. It was to make the audience feel something real, even if that real feeling was complicated and a little bit painful. He pushed forward with his vision. He trusted those unsettled audiences more than the comfortable ones. And that trust, that faith in the honest, uncomfortable feeling over the safe and easy one is what made the Asphalt Jungle the landmark film it became. A small choice to trust discomfort changed everything. Old methods, new truth. The Asphalt Jungle is more than a crime film. It is a film about people, about the distance between who we are and who we dreamed of becoming, about the way that distance can lead us into dark places, wrong choices, and streets that only go one way. John Huston looked at his criminals and refused to stop seeing them as human beings. That refusal, that insistence on complexity, on compassion, on honesty, is what made the film last. 70 years have passed since those cameras rolled in Cincinnati and on studio lots in California. The world has changed enormously, but the questions the film asks have not changed at all. Who is really dangerous? Who is really respectable? Where does a dream end and a mistake begin? These are questions every generation asks in its own language. The Asphalt Jungle asked them in the language of shadow and silence and honest performance, and the answers it offered were not simple or easy or comfortable. They were true, and truth does not have an expiration date. If these stories moved something in you, if they made you want to watch the film or watch it again with new eyes, then this was time well spent. Every great film hides a truth inside it, waiting patiently for someone to come looking. If you enjoyed these stories, subscribe for more. Every movie hides a truth, and we'll keep uncovering them, one story at a time.